Welcome to the Zencast. My name is Dale Pickles. I'm the Managing Director of B Squared and the host of the Zencast. The Zencast is here as a way to improve knowledge around Zen and to raise awareness. On this week's episode, my guest was Dr Joanna Grace, and Jo is a sensory engagement inclusion specialist, and she now has her PhD. Well done, Jo. In this episode, we discuss the barriers to mental health care for autistic individuals. The Zencast is created by us here at B Squared, and Steps for Life is one of our assessment frameworks within our assessment software, Connecting Steps. It covers functional academic skills, employability skills, and all those independent life skills. From the most complex pupil all the way up to those functional skills level 2 kind of band. And it's designed to be used from Key Stage 4 and beyond. Visit the B Square website or click on the meeting link in the show notes to book a meeting with me to take you through our Steps for Life framework and our other assessment frameworks, and also what the software does as well. But for now, let's get on with that podcast. In this week's show, we're discussing the barriers to mental health for autistic people. Discussing this topic with me today is Joanna Grace. Jo is a sensory engagement inclusion specialist. She is now Dr. Jo, author, trainer, TEDx speaker, and founder of the Sensory Project. Joanna has worked with people with learning disabilities and neurodivergent conditions aged from birth to old age. I'm guessing the age goes up every year.
Yeah, I hope so.
Welcome back, Dr. Jo.
Oh, thanks for having me.
You are welcome. Before we start, you want to include a trigger warning for what we're going to discuss.
Yes, so obviously we're talking about mental health today, and it is likely that we will talk about suicide, self-harm, abuse, and all sorts of other grotty things. And so hopefully you're listening on some sort of device that you can pause. And if you need to do that, then it's a very sensible act of self-care to not listen if this is going to be hard for you. But it's important that we talk about difficult things. And I sort of need that trigger warning for me as well. It's important that I don't say the things if it's too hard to say.
So we're talking about autistic people and mental health. And you're probably going to know, but in my head, typically mental health is the same for everyone. There's a positive and a negative, and we want to be positive. However, the day-to-day life and the way you're experiencing the world is different. And not just a one different, every autistic person could be different. So therefore, that known starting point for most people isn't the same, is it?
Yeah. So I think the thing to do is to separate autism and mental health. And that's a really important separation to make because it's not always one that has been made. And autism still, you will find places where it is described as a mental health condition rather than a neurotype. So there is nothing about being autistic that causes poor mental health. But if you look at the research around autism and mental health, and I brought some quotes from research with me because I think sometimes when autistic people are struggling, they can feel like they're making a bit of a fuss, or that if they just pulled their socks up, it would all be better type of thing. And people who support autistic people can have similar views that this is not a thing that if we just, buttoned up, tried a bit harder, stiff upper lipped it, that it would get better. So I think looking at what the research tells us or what the research is reporting really underlines that this is a thing. And so here's my quotes. So autistic people are significantly more likely to die by suicide. Autistic women are more likely to die by suicide than autistic men. Autistic people with low support needs are more likely to die by suicide than autistic people with high support needs. Autistic people are more likely to self-harm than non-autistic people, and a third of autistic adults in the UK have serious mental health problems. And that is not because of autism. None of that is because of autism. It is because of the barriers to good mental health that autistic people experience. And we have come a long way in our understanding of mental health. I mean, if we were to reflect on what understanding of mental health was like when we were at school. It's very much within our lifespans that we've seen a real surge in understanding that mental health is a thing, that there are ways that we go about looking after our mental health, that mental health is considered a valuable thing for boys as well as for girls. We've had all this progress. And with that progress, there has been significant research interest in mental health and how we get better at supporting mental health. And there's been loads of good research done, but it has all been done on neurotypical people. And so what we have is really good research about how to support neurotypical mental health and very little on how to support autistic mental health.
So there was, I believe you told me this, and it's something about undiagnosed autistic women are more likely to die by suicide. And it's something about the earlier the diagnosis, the better. I can't remember.
I don't know about when the diagnosis, but I know that diagnosis, formal identification of neurotype and self-identification of neurotype are protective over your mental health. Basically, if you have an understanding of who you are and understand that who you are is a legitimate way of being, that's a more mentally healthy way to be living.
And based on your quote, the common factor is autism. So autism must be the factor, obviously. And I think we've discussed it on various things before, that it's the autism that's causing this. It's like, no, just because they're autistic, it's not their autism causing it. It's the environment they're in that is kind of impacting them.
What all of those research statistics speak to is that this is a marginalized population that are not being understood and have increased vulnerability due to that marginalization. And you could pick up statistics like these for other marginalized populations. So it would not surprise me, and I probably could find you these statistics, to find that gay people are more likely to die by suicide than straight people, or that people from other marginalized communities, immigrant communities, or whatever form of marginalization you're experiencing, what you're experiencing is increased pressure on your mental health. And when you experience increased pressure on your mental health, then that increases your risk of death by suicide. And so what all these stats about autistic people say is that this is a population who are under considerable pressure with regards to their mental health. And we don't know how to support them. And that's an interesting one, because you would think that, well, we know how to support good mental health, so we do know how to support them. And it misses that there is a difference here. Mental health research has been done on non-autistic people, and it's not even that autistic people have been a part of it as a small number within studies. They have been actively excluded from research. So, for example, if you were doing a study to look at whether having a good night's sleep improves your mood, you might need 50 people to sleep in your overnight place, wherever it is, and then you're going to do some mood tests on them in the morning. You would get a sample of 50 people. You'd realize 3 of these people are autistic. You would worry that those autistic people are going to skew your results. And so you would remove them from the study and replace them with neurotypical people. And autistic people have been actively removed from research about mental health for those reasons. So what we have is good research about mental health, and we don't know if it applies to autistic people or not. And there is some emergent work that looks at things that we know to be great strategies for the general population, things like mindfulness as a strategy for anxiety. There's so much work been done into mindfulness now. 10 years ago, like when we were at school, it was just something hippies did at festivals, along with angels and crystals and all the rest of it. But now Oxford University have a research department that studies mindfulness. Elizabeth Blackburn's team won the Nobel Prize for their research that shows mindfulness slows down telomere decay, which is your biological aging. Like, we know so much, and we know that mindfulness is a great answer to anxiety for neurotypical people. If you were an undiagnosed autistic person, say, you could well go to the doctor saying, I feel really anxious, because a lot of autistic people do live with anxiety all the time. And the doctor might say to you, would you like some medication for your anxiety? You need to go, no, because you're very suspicious of medication, because you've had experiences in the past of medication acting differently for you than it does for other people, maybe. And that you go, well, would you like to have this? Would you like to go to a group to learn mindfulness? Or would you like an app to help you be mindful? Because mindfulness is an answer to anxiety. And you'd say, I'll take the app, please. I don't want to go to a group full of strangers.
Yeah, completely agree.
And then you go home and you Google, because if you're a good autistic person, you'll look up your research and you'll go and find out is what the doctor has said is right. And Google will tell you that mindfulness is demonstrably an answer for anxiety. So you think, great. And you begin your app and the app says, close your eyes and sit calmly and pay attention to the present. And when you do that, you feel more anxious. And you think, I'm not doing this right because this is meant to help me, this app. I've got to try harder. And you try harder and you feel more anxious. And then you feel worried because it's not working. So that it's not working increases your anxiety. And then you start to kind of hunt around for other people's experiences of this. And everybody else says that this is great and it really helps. And so you think, oh, the other people are clearly trying harder than I am. They're better than I am. They're working. So you put more effort in and you feel more anxious and more worried. And eventually you give up because it didn't work. You weren't good enough to do it. And now you have increased anxiety, lower self-esteem, and you don't go back to the doctor because you know that the doctor gave you the answer, but the answer doesn't work for you. So you know there's no hope for you because you're going to stay anxious and frightened forever. And you can see how the spiral starts. And the work around mindfulness, that's an interesting emergent, it's probably more emerged now, but last time I read it was emergent. But I've been reading other stuff recently. What we know is that mindfulness is safe for people whose present is safe. And if you're somebody who's experienced trauma, then the experiences of your past occupy your present. And an invitation to be mindful can be an invitation to reoccupy past traumatizing experiences, which will increase your anxiety. And so that could be one of the reasons why mindfulness practice isn't working for the autistic population, because the other thing that you will see in research is that we are a highly traumatized population.
What's interesting is that kind of emptying your mind, being in the moment, and kind of what's great about right now, I can do. I can sit there, I can close my eyes, not 100% of the time, but most of the time I can sit there. So tomorrow I'm going down to Brighton and I'm going to go sit on the beach or sit on a bar with a drink and enjoy the view. And I'll be able to close my eyes and I've got the sound of the waves on the beach, seagulls, bit of sun. And right there in that moment, life is great. My colleague John cannot. He is exactly as you described. He cannot kind of empty his mind. He cannot get rid of those worries. And he, exactly as you described it, felt like a failure because he couldn't, which then made him more. It's literally exactly what he went through.
Yeah.
And so it's not every autistic person.
No, never every autistic person. But it's interesting. Your description there was very sensory. So I wonder if what John is trying to do is empty his mind, but what you are doing is paying attention to the sensory world around you.
And it might be, how we empty all those sorts of things. But it's interesting, just the way he reads books and everything is different. And I think what I was kind of saying at the beginning is we know that being calm, we know loads of things are good for us. But I think and again, with all your research, is what a typical person can cope with. A neurotypical person can, when they're sitting in a room and something's going on around them, they're perfectly calm. That autistic person, that neurodivergent person could be heightened, could be in the uncertainty zone.
Oh, there's fantastic research about how much information autistic brains take in. There's a study that showed autistic brains at rest produce 42% more information than non-autistic brains. And I loved that it was 42. But if you are sitting in your yoga studio with your mat to go and it's a calm space for you, it might not be a calm space for the autistic person who can hear the electricity in the plug sockets and listen to all the little creaks outside. And it's a different sort of environment. Yeah.
And it's that sort of thing. So And I think that's a big difference, is we sit there going, well, I'm all right, so you must be all right. And I also think you talked about those with high support needs and the low support. So the low support are more likely.
Yeah, that's a really interesting statistic to look at, because I fall into the population that is at greatest risk of death by suicide. So I think it's something like I am 14 times more likely to die by suicide than my non-autistic peers. And so what do we think from that? Do we look at people like me and think, like, I'm particularly flaky, I might just tap out? And does it mean that I'm under more pressure than the people with high support needs? Or is it like a price of masking? This is what masking costs.
I was about to say, because you don't look autistic.
No, sorry about that. I mean, I do a
And,
bit.
and I think when you have high support needs, I think you'll go, oh, they need support. When you are that invisible autistic person who
Yeah,
can mask and
yeah.
blend in, even though underneath you're struggling, I think they're going, well, they're fine. Look at them.
It's, yes, that distinction between high and low support needs is a muddled one, because you miss things at both ends, don't you?
Yes.
But also really blunt practical things like, where is the person with high support needs going to get the resources, and where would they get the privacy? So is it just that they can't enact an out or do not understand an out? So I don't know that I wouldn't say that the stress in the situation is any different. It could be that the stress is equal, but some of us have more opportunities. Yeah.
It's an interesting statistic. And in my head, you've got the undiagnosed who are still trying to find the answer of why they're struggling when everyone else can. I think that everyone else can, for me as a child, just lived through me. When everyone else can, it's your fault. And that led to it's my fault. And that kind of just carried through all the way through my whole school career. When I got into work, it didn't matter. It was only during school, when I got into work, I could do things and I was seen as an equal and treated the same as everyone else, which was great. There are things I could do better. There are things I struggled with. I was just different. And everyone kind of used the bits I did well and forgave the bits I didn't do well. And life was all right. But it's that I always felt, and I think it's one of those things, those younger years, how you're made to feel about yourself will carry through your entire life. So that's a really big thing that I think when you are supporting, never use words, well, I'm all right. You don't look autistic. Or everything is fine.
If you can't see somebody else's struggles, doesn't mean they're not there. And we all know that from the glossy social media world, where everyone is great and then suddenly people are not so great. But if you think about how we support mental health, a lot of our avenues to supporting mental health are talking and social connection. And those are things that autistic people can struggle with. And there is research around how GPs experience treating autistic people. So I said, imagine you're the person who goes to the doctor and says, I'm anxious. GPs report that they find it harder to treat autistic people because we have atypical expressions of emotions. We might describe our emotional landscape in different ways. The statistics around alexithymia, 10% of the general population have some degree of alexithymia and 50% of the autistic population. And alexithymia is a condition in the brain that makes it difficult for you to retrieve the words associated with emotions. It's like a physiological thing, and your brain can't pick up those words when you need to use them. And so if your mental health strategy is talking about how you feel, which is many a mental health strategy, and you physically can't do that, then that's very difficult. And the caution around medications, that medications can act differently on autistic people. And so you might have people who are, I bet you will find a lot of autistic women telling you that they've had very extreme reactions to taking the pill, for example. So avoiding medications or having funny reactions to medications. And many, many neurodivergent people who have the access and capacity self-medicate in various ways that then feed into a risk of mental health problems. So it's a very muddled thing. There's a lot of gaslighting of the autistic population. There's a lot of that story that it is your fault, or that you need to be fixed, or that your report of how you are isn't valid. Like, you're overreacting. You've made an issue of this when this wasn't an issue. And to be mentally well, your experience has to be valid and validated. And we do it to ourselves as well, because we internalize that ableism. And so I bet you think, I should have tried harder, I should do better. Because those narratives last in you, and they affect how you feel. And also, if you get misunderstood diagnostically, so you go to the GP and say, I'm anxious, and the GP goes, oh, this person has anxiety. When, if you are, so my imagined autistic person is feeling anxious because they're in a world that is built on a presumption of a neurotype they don't own. The lights are too bright, the supermarket is too noisy, the classroom is too busy. So they feel anxious, but that's not because they have anxiety and are imagining and catastrophizing a future, as somebody who suffers from anxiety as a mental health condition might have. It's because they feel anxious proportionately to their experience of the world around them. I have a analogy that I've been playing with recently about a cat in a swimming pool. If you're doing an intervention with autistic people, or if you're looking to support autistic people, I ask, would it help a cat in a swimming pool? The cat in the swimming pool feels terribly anxious. It's so anxious. And just telling it to be more mindful doesn't help. It's still a cat in a swimming pool. And the autistic person who goes to the doctor and says, I feel anxious, is the cat in the swimming pool. And when the doctor then says, oh, you are suffering from anxiety, you go home as somebody with an understanding, I am a person who has anxiety. And then you look up anxiety, and you look up, you can buy those self-help books about how to cope with your anxiety. And you try to cope with your anxiety that the professional has told you that you have. And it leads to a misunderstanding that takes you. So many adults identified with autism have acquired a handful of mental health diagnoses on their way to being diagnosed. And I have a friend at the moment who has a good half a dozen mental health diagnoses. And I keep saying to her, I think you're autistic. And she says, I don't want another list. I don't want another thing on the list. I'm already dealing with all of this. And I'm trying to persuade her. I'm like, I think it would mop the rest of them up. I don't think you are any of the rest of them. I think you are an autistic person experiencing the world in autistic ways, and you're not, you haven't lost your marbles. It's valid, but she's not used to considering her experience as valid. And so it's
And all you have to do is just take the cat out of the swimming pool.
Take the cat out. Maybe you could let the cat out of the swimming pool for like 20 minutes because it's got really stressed, and then lob it back in. And then the next time it gets really stressed, because it does have to learn to swim, It's really important.
But it is those sorts of things. It is, and you might have a dog swimming past the cat, and that dog's perfectly happy.
Yeah.
Well, he's got 4 legs and a tail.
It's such a good analogy.
So you've got 4 legs and a tail.
Yeah.
You should love it as well.
Yeah. It's really, the cat is the other thing that the cat gets in trouble for in the swimming pool, is it has its claws out an awful lot. It's very scratchy. That cat gets really hissy, needs to learn to sort of talk more calmly and not to hurt others, because it's wrong to hurt others.
The thing is, my cat did a disappearing trick for 6 days the other month or 2 ago. We had a new neighbour. Opened their shed. He thought, I'll have a look in here. Then the neighbour came back. Cat hid. Closed the shed. I could have sworn we checked. 6 days later, we found the cat. So I go in. My cat is in the corner. I love my cat. And he is looking not happy. I go up to him. He's scared. Is that sort of thing. He's in that fight or flight mode. He looks at me, doesn't really recognise me, sniffs my hand, and then kind of lets out oh, it's you, meow. I pick him up. His claws are out. And we walk out the shed. The moment he's out the shed, he thinks, I'm going to run off. And I'm like, no. I know that what he really wants is food, and the quickest way is for me just to carry him home. So his claws are out and digging in. I just hold on. I do not blame him for doing any of his things. He's had a really horrible experience. His claws are out in a defensive thing. Everything he was doing for his self-preservation, I just had a from my point of view, a better understanding of the situation that I could get him to that food bowl really, really quickly.
Yeah.
But he probably wanted to run away and hide somewhere till everything was safe and then come and get food. Which was right? I do not know.
I bet a lot of parents of stressed autistic children would resonate with that story of holding the cat. Yeah.
And it is, and you're literally going, yeah, you're holding on, your claws are out. Yeah, I'm doing what I think's best for you. And although maybe that food was the best thing, he hasn't eaten for 5 days and he went through 2 pouches very, very quickly and some dreamies. And after that, he calmed down. But in that moment, he probably wanted some space and then the food. But neither of us are right and neither of us are wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. If you could keep the cat somewhere safe and provide him with the food without forcing him to do any, move to any particular things, then there would be an argument for that. But I think what's critical is your understanding of the cat and the why the cat is behaving as such. So the other thing that happens is people express clear signs of distress, like by coming along and saying I'm anxious, or by showing you their anxiety through self-injurious behavior, head banging, biting themselves. And then people use autism as the answer for that. They go, well, that's because they're autistic. And if you haven't got that narrative that says that this is a valid way of being, and this is not an inherently mentally ill way of being, so that if somebody is acting distressed, then we're looking at why. And as a community, when you see all those statistics about we're more like, what was it? A third of autistic adults have a serious mental health problem. And you look at those statistics in all the different age brackets and across all the different groupings, what you find is a population of people who really struggle with mental ill health. You look at the wise population size and you find things like our risk of bullying in childhood is significantly high. Like if you have been bullied when you're a child, you're more likely to struggle with your mental health. You don't have to be autistic to be bullied as a child. It's just one of those intersectional places. So your risk of bullying in childhood is higher. Your risk of bullying in adulthood is higher. Your risk of bullying in the workplace is higher. Your risk of bullying within friendships is higher. Your risk of being in a coercive control relationship is higher. And there are really sad studies like autistic children are 2 to 3 times more likely to be abused than non-autistic children. And the risk to people who don't have access to mouth words is really, really high. Because to be horribly blunt, if they cannot tell you what happened, then they are a more attractive target to somebody who might want to do something awful. There was a study that showed 9 out of 10 autistic women have been sexually assaulted. So we have these histories of abuse, victimization, bullying, and because of these histories, we carry a higher mental health burden. And then all of the things muddle together and you become a very complicated thing, even right down to the not simple, but what we were saying at the start about mindfulness not being safe for traumatized populations. I'm saying here that we could have had all these awful things happen to us, but you don't actually need to have had these awful things happen to you to be traumatized, because trauma is a very specific thing in the brain. And you can be traumatized by relatively low level experiences if you don't have the power or the understanding of what's going on around you. And so even if you've kept your child safe from every possible experience of bullying and nobody has done anything horrible, they can still be carrying layers of trauma from their experience of bumping into a world that's not set up for their neurotype. And so you still have a complicated pattern.
And that sort of thing is, if you have sensory overload going out and about and you're kind of forced into that, that's going to give you trauma. No specific person has to be involved in that.
Yeah.
That is your kind of how the world impacts you. That can cause trauma. It doesn't have to involve anyone else, does it? A lot of the time it does. But the world, how they perceive it, that is enough to give some children trauma.
There's a really interesting link that So it's a link I'll speculate because I can't point you to a study. Most of what I'm saying, I could point you, if people want the references, I've got them somewhere on my hard drive. But this is a speculation one. So not yet. I'll get to the speculation in a minute. Trauma is to do with how you were able to react in accordance to a situation that you found stressful. So a really classic example, which I think is in the book, The Body Keeps the Score, which is a spectacular book written by one of the world's leading trauma specialists, is the Haiti earthquake disaster. So do you remember there was a horrible earthquake in Haiti? People's homes were destroyed, people were injured and killed, and a horrible, horrible thing happened. And the movement of the tectonic plates that caused the earthquake also triggered a tsunami wave out in the bay. And so the American military flew in to rescue the people whose, houses have just been destroyed, who are on the beach. And they come in the big choppers, they land, a whole load of people climb aboard and they fly them out. And as they're flying out, they do a head count of how many people are left on the beach, how many people they've got in the chopper. They do a calculation of how long it's going to take that wave to hit the beach and how long it's going to take them to make the return trip. And they figure that if they only carry the number that they've carried, they're not going to be able to rescue everybody. So as they fly out, they try and work out how can we carry more people the next time we land. And when they go back, they land, and instead of letting the people climb onto the chopper, they get off and they strap the people to gurneys so that they can stack them up the walls of the helicopter. And that way they're able to rescue more people. So more people are rescued on the second hit and they clear everybody from the beaches. Both populations of people have had a horrible, horrible thing happen to them, but only the second population are traumatized. And that's not to say that the first population got a lighter deal. They've still had a horrific thing, but it can be dealt with in therapy. That it can, all the approaches to coping with things that we have that have been well developed from the 70s onwards work on that population. But for the population that was strapped and lifted aboard, that experience stays in their present, which is what it's when an experience doesn't go into your memory, it stays in your present. We know it from soldiers jumping at the sounds of cars backfiring, don't we? But the distinction between the two is whether you were able to act to get out of the experience. So it was because the first group had climbed aboard the helicopter themselves that they didn't experience trauma. And our action in day-to-day life tends to be through words. No, I don't want to. Stop. Please, can I have that back? I forgot my pencil. I'm sorry. And if you don't have access to that, or if you don't know what words to say, then very low level experiences like not having your pencil out when the teacher told you to can stay in your present. And it's not that that's a particularly horrible thing, but just like if you think of all those little moments of awkwardness in your life, if they all constantly occupied your present, all the bits where you got something slightly wrong or somebody slightly misunderstood you or you didn't quite, and they were all present with you all the time. I had a partner once who used to get very frustrated with me, and he used to yell at me, "It's like you live at primary school." Because when I was at primary school, I didn't speak a whole lot. I had repetitive movements that I did in the playground. I ate beige food, and a lot of my experience of primary school is with me in the present, always, because I was traumatized by that experience. And it's really easy to traumatize children. When adults fight in a household and the child hasn't got any way of making them stop, that's a traumatizing experience for children. And because of those communication differences and because of the sensory differences that autistic people live with, it's just much easier to accumulate trauma. So here's my speculation. Sorry, it was a long route to the speculation. That the mechanisms in the brain that are doing this are the old survival mechanisms. So it's a message that you're under threat, and then you've got to run away from the monster or kill the monster. And the doing of something, the physical doing of something, is kind of telling your body, I'm doing something to get away from this monster. So if you were somebody who was experiencing this kind of low-level trauma in day-to-day life, I wonder whether putting bits of movement into your life would make sense, because it would give you that feeling in your body that you're doing something in response to it. And then wouldn't that make sense of fiddle toys and stimming and things like that? I wonder if it's a protective element against that kind of background trauma of living in a world that presumes a neurotype you don't own.
Because you're not allowed to run away.
No.
So
I mean,
that would be the ultimate.
you should be allowed to run
raised, away. My anxiety's up. It's there. All the chemicals are going from my head telling me to run, but I'm not allowed to. And so, yeah. So in that makes sense that actually the fidget toys or any physical movement, rocking,
it's
is kind of releasing that energy which is built up.
Yeah.
You need the energy to go. Otherwise, you're always in that heightened state.
Yeah. If I wanted to do another speculation, mindfulness is understood in a very Descartesian way, as in we're a body and a brain, and it's a non-judgmental attention to the present in the brain is what you're asking people to do. You talked about clearing your head of thoughts and just it's a non-judgmental attention to the present. I wonder if there's a kind of mindfulness of the body that is. So I do a lot of hula hooping. People who follow me on social media will see me hooping. And when you hoop, you have to be attending to your present, because otherwise the hoop falls down, in a non-judgmental way. I suppose you could do it in a judgmental way, like I'm not hula hooping very well, but generally if you're just kind of hooping, and that a presentness in your body rather than a presentness in your mind is possibly a safer form of mindfulness for traumatized populations.
I talk about things I do to relax are things that take me away. And it's interesting, in my counselling, every time you talk about escaping. I escape into a book. I escape into this. And I like sim racing. I do lots of racing. It's really good because I'm in a chair and I'm moving a wheel and pedals. So I'm not hugely physical, but there's a lot of force feedback to it. But it takes my ultimate concentration. I can't be thinking of anything else. I have to be concentrating on what I'm doing. I think with hula hooping, yes, your body's doing it, but you're not sitting there daydreaming. You're concentrating on what you're doing. Whereas I think when you go for a walk with a dog, you can still daydream. Your mind, your body's getting some exercise, but your head can still worry. Your head can still focus on all the things you haven't done, why they can't. Yeah. Whereas there's something about finding activities where you really have to fully engage your brain and also your body that actually I am doing this. And I think for you, that way you just got the hula hooping, it was like, yeah, it's exactly the same.
I run as well. And running is just nightmarish because it's all of the things that your mind would shout at you and nothing that you can do about it. So it's like a lesson in madness going for a run for me. But hooping is never like that. But I wonder, when I was a child at school and I used to have repetitive movements in the playground, I used to swing my arms around my body. And the movement that I make hooping is very similar to. So I wonder if maybe I've just found a socially acceptable way of regaining an old childhood stim type of thing. There's other sensory differences that create barriers to supporting mental health for neurodivergent people. And a really common one is differences in interoception. Because your interoceptive sensory system is a subconscious sensory system that is unique amongst your senses because it's the only sensory system that's looking at your internal world. All of your other senses are about sensing your external world. So your interoceptive sense is the sense that tells you whether you need the toilet or whether you're hungry, but it also is the sense that tells you how you're feeling. And it's an odd one because people, like if you said, how are you feeling? People think that they're just reporting instantly their feeling, like I'm feeling happy, I'm feeling stressed. But there is a mechanism within the body that looks at how you're feeling. So when you say I'm feeling stressed, what's happened is your interoception has noticed that your shoulder muscles are really tense, that you're frowning, that your heartbeat is going fast. It picks up all those sensations and sort of feeds back to you, I'm stressed. But if you don't have fully functioning like your interoceptive system can be impaired just the way any of your other senses can be impaired. It can process information differently just the way any of your other senses can process information differently. So you could have stress in your body, like you could be feeling stress. Your shoulder muscles are tight, your face is frowning, your heart is racing, but you would not be feeling you wouldn't be
know.
Your interoception wouldn't be seeing it. It's like being partially sighted to your own emotional landscape. And if you've got a good readout on your emotional landscape, then you can adjust what you're doing. So a typical example would be if you have a colleague at work that you just don't click with, nothing wrong with them, nothing wrong with you. You're just not, you don't match up personality wise. When you're with them in a conversation or you're like, they're just a bit irritating to you. And so you move away and you talk to somebody who's not irritating to you, and you'd hold no malice towards that person because you understand that's just the way they are. And it's there, but they can be like that. I just don't really want to hang out with you. I'll hang out with these people I do want to hang out with. And so you move away from that source of stress. If you didn't have that readout, you would be hanging out with that person, feeling more and more stressed, but not knowing it until it's really, really massive. I remember the classic for this is a young man I met who said, I knew I was angry because I hit him. And it was that way round. He hadn't felt angry and then hit the chap. He'd noticed that he had hit the chap and gone, I must be feeling angry.
But that interoception is, I'm literally going, no, I feel my body. But I've learned I don't always. And that thing about stress is, so I was stressed not long ago, but I didn't know. I was just, my breathing was weird. And I was sort of going, what's wrong? And I'm literally, and my shoulders were fully up. It was fully tense, and I literally had not noticed. And I'm like, so why am I stressed? And I didn't know what would cause this. I didn't know I was stressed. And I literally sort of went up to my body and went, oh, why am I?
Yeah, you're recognizing from external markers the same as that chap.
But I had to then work back and go, why am I, what's causing me the stress? What is it? And I worked it out and then dealt with it. But there were times where I'd get in the car and I'd be going, and I'm going, why am I breathing like this? And it's obviously my subconsciously doing it, but it was fully subconscious. I was not aware of me doing it, or I can tell you why I was doing it, but it was happening. So in my head, I get my body.
Yeah.
But I don't. I do not. There are things I'm completely missing.
I have really duff interoception. So you can tell if you've got really duff interoception because you don't know that you need to go for a wee. Like sometimes I'll sit there in the evening and think, I think I might need a wee. But I'll just watch another couple of TV programs and then you're like, no, I probably do need a wee. You go up to the bathroom, you're like, oh my goodness, did I? Lucky I was in the house. But that sort of thing means that I don't notice when I'm getting stressed, and I'm not particularly responsible about it because I tend to think, well, it's quite a cavalier attitude. I get stuff done anyway. It doesn't matter if I'm stressed because I get stuff done anyway. I'm very productive as a writer because I get stuff done anyway, and it doesn't stop me. The trouble is, if you don't listen to those markers, then your body steps in and stops you on purpose. And the difference for me between when I was single and when I've lived with my husband is really marked. The year before I moved in with my husband, I had 11 emergency admissions to medical centres around the country because I travel for work. So I didn't put these are not on my social media because social media is the glossy side of life. But yeah, I had 11 emergency things done to me with nice heavy medication and things like that because I wasn't noticing that I was stressed. Since my husband moved in with me, which we were very like 1950s, he moved in 6 months after we got married. But autistic people take time to adjust to change, so it's fine and he understands. He will tell me when I seem stressed. So he will say to me, you seem a bit stressed today, Jo. And I go, I don't know what you're on about. Go away. And then if I stay stressed, he'll tell me the next day as well, like, you still seem stressed. You're like, oh, you said that yesterday. And when he's been going on about it for a bit, I have a look around to see, like, why is he on about me being stressed? Because I'm fine. I'm just doing my work. And the way I can tell as an external marker is lists. I make lists because I need my now and next to get me through a day. And when I've begun making lists of my lists, that's normally a sign that I'm stressed. So you look down and you realize you've got several lists of lists and you think, maybe there's some things I could take off some of these lists and then I get less stressed. And since I've lived with him, I have had no emergency procedures. And prior to living with him, the doctors are looking at, or maybe there's something wrong with this part of her body. Maybe there's something going on. Maybe she's got a rare condition. And actually, no, I just don't know how I feel. And then when there's somebody there who goes, this is how you feel. And it's a really contradictory notion to think that, because mental health support for neurotypical people is about saying, how do you feel? Tell me how you feel. And maybe there's a version of mental health support for autistic people where it's the other way around, where the person is going, I'm going to tell you how you feel.
That would be
this
quite
is how
good.
you feel. Yeah, really useful to me.
But I know when I'm busy, I get migraines.
That's your body stopping you, yeah.
Well, no, it's myself stopping me, because what happens when I'm busy, I almost like I turn off that interoception part.
Oh, you tune it out.
So I tune it out. I'm focusing on my screen. I'm focusing on what I need to do. And I would just carry on and carry on and carry on until my body's stopping me. And this went on for a while. And then I slowly realized it wasn't what I was doing. This is what I wasn't doing that was causing it. I wasn't drinking. I wasn't having fluids. I was getting dehydrated. And I recognize it when I always found it was just, I'd really get my head down. I'd go through it all and I wouldn't drink. And at the end, I'd get a migraine. And I used to think, it's because of the stress of what I did.
Yeah.
No, I stopped drinking. I had no fluids that day and I'd have a dehydration, basic migraine. And my daughters go, I've got a migraine. My first question is, how much did you drink today? And she'll go, and it's just, she has the same thing. I think she gets preoccupied. So I like those water bottles with those markers on how much you've drunk and things like that. I count my drinks. I do not. I'll often have Coke or Pepsi at home with my. I won't share a glass with my wife, not because she's dirty or anything, but if we're having the same glass, I can't monitor how much I've drunk. Yeah. I might think, I've had a glass. Well, actually, she drank all of it. Well, I wasn't noticing. So we have separate glasses to make sure that I can count how much fluid I've had. And if I'm getting a headache, I'll just go, I'm not drunk enough. It's not I feel it. It's when I start the headache, I go, haven't drunk enough. And then generally what I have is a sweet cup of tea. And that seems to help. But it's not the stress. It's the blocking out those signals or not noticing them or whatever it is. That's what causes my migraines. And I think there are lots of people, it is hyper-focusing and everything else kind of disappearing.
It's interesting because if you were supporting somebody who had high support needs and you're trying to work this stuff out from the outside, like we're talking about our experience from the inside, you would be looking at these external markers. And if you are somebody who, if you love that person and you are highly attuned to them, your interoception can give you a readout on their emotional state. So you can feel their feelings through your body's responses to their body. And that instinct on how they feel is probably right, And my husband's instinct on how I feel is way better than my instinct on how I feel. And what would be useful if he was my parent and I was younger and more, open to learning, then what would be really useful is to have him tell me how I feel and tell me how he knows it. If I was parenting a small me, I would want to habituate me into checking how I feel in the way that you habituate children into brushing their teeth. Like nobody wants to brush their teeth. Everybody's bored by brushing their teeth, but you're made to do it. You build a habit out of it because you understand that it's good for you. And initially that's because the adults around you understand that it's good for you. And so you get into the habit of brushing your teeth. It is good for me to know how I feel. So if I was little me, ideally, you would get me into the habit of knowing how I feel. So you could do things like tell me what external markers you're using to know how I feel. Like you're moving your body a lot, Joe. Is that because you're anxious? Can you put your hand on your forehead? Can you feel that you're frowning? I think you might be worried about something. Can you feel that you're frowning? Or just simply looking in a mirror if you have a face that shows emotions, looking in a mirror to go, how do I look like I feel? Because I miss it to a really high degree. I have I have horrible stories where it ends up in A&E units, but I have happy stories as well. There's one I get to do training all around the country, and I meet these groups of twinkly-eyed people who want a more inclusive future, and I have the most fun with them. And I used to, when my husband lived up country and we were still dating, I used to go and see him after I'd done a booking. So I'd had this day, I think it was a day with portage workers, because they're some of the best. I'd had such a fantastic day. I got back to his house in the evening, late, been on the train. He puts me in the living room on the sofa, goes to make me my dinner, because he's a lovely man. That's why I married him. And comes into the room with my dinner. And I looked at my dinner, and it was my favorite dinner. And you know, like when you're carrying too many shopping bags getting out of the car that you can't lock the car or something like that. I looked at my dinner and I thought, oh, that looks great. Shame I haven't got a hand to have it. And he sort of stood there with the plate, and I'm just sat on the sofa watching TV like this with my fingers in my cheeks. And I looked at the plate, and he's pushing it towards me. And so I snatched it and I put it on my lap. And then I went back to watching the TV with my fingers in my cheeks. And he went back out to the kitchen to make himself a drink to pick up his dinner. He came back into the living room, sat down beside me. And he's got perfect comedy timing, because he waited just a beat. Like, I thought he just sat down to watch the TV. And then he looked across at me, and I'm just sat there with my dinner on my lap. I'm not eating it. And he went, okay, Joe, what you doing? And I looked at him with my fingers in my face like this. And I'd been thinking about the TV, so I hadn't thought about what I was doing. And I said, oh, my face is too high up. And you know, when you've been smiling so much that your face hurts, I was physically clawing my own face back down with my fingers, and I hadn't noticed that I was happy. And so he could go, I can see that you're smiling. I think you might be happy. But if you put it into a habit in my day, like a really good one for me would be anytime I go to a bathroom, there's normally a mirror in a bathroom, isn't there? You could look in the mirror and look and see how do you feel. And then you would get that readout as you go along, and you can make the adjustments as you go along. Whereas if you go around not knowing, you only spot it when it gets really, really big. And so I only spot it when when I'm desperate for a wee, or when I'm absolutely starving hungry, or when I'm so catastrophically stressed that, life can't be done anymore. And it's worth having a readout earlier on.
I've heard, don't know if it's true, that if you're neurodivergent, habits are harder to get into. You have to do them more. But I also think that you can have your habit, but if you're not in the great place that morning, then that habit's gone. Then you're not doing it that day. And then you just don't do it for a few days, and the habit's so I think habits and I would love to know someone who's done some research about this, because it is one of those things that I know I have to work really hard to get into a habit. Well, I'm in that habit and everything's great, but if something rocks it, I can fall out of that habit so easily and not return to it. I'd love to know the reasons why. And generally, things I do as a habit are conscious things I have to do in my head. It's not, I find myself in the bathroom brushing my teeth. I had to go, I've had my breakfast. The next step is to brush my teeth. I brush after breakfast. Some people don't. That's a whole different conversation. But I have to consciously remember. And sometimes I skip breakfast.
I recommend a list.
And again, if I don't have breakfast, then the trigger isn't there I've had my breakfast.
Yeah.
So I'll sometimes go, oh, I've not brushed my teeth. It's not a habit. It takes conscious effort every day.
I wonder whether this is something to do with the myth of independence as well, because the idea that we have to do this on our own is a much perpetuated, like you have to teach children to be independent. We must become independent adults. But it's a nonsense. None of us are actually independent. And so maybe it's partly about developing the habit in that person, but also about developing the understanding in the people around that this is one of the ways that we support this person. And we all support each other, and we do it in different ways. And you might be needed to be prompted to brush your teeth. I might need to be told that I'm happy. These are things we can do for each other.
Yes, definitely. And I think my daughters struggle with things, and I just go, right, what can you do? You're rubbish at that. So what tools have you got? And one of them is very useful: alarms on phones or apps.
Yeah. So thinking about things that we could do for promoting mental health for autistic people is a nice one. So top of my list would be identity and representation. knowing your neurotype, knowing that it is a valid way of being, and then seeing other people, encountering other people in life, in literature, in film that are, like you in some way is so important. It's an almost perfect parallel with the gay narrative from the 1950s. The experience of being neurodivergent is so similar to that experience. And the overlap between those communities is huge. So if you were the gay kid in the 50s, you would have known that you were different from the people around you. You might not have known what that difference was, especially when you were little. And at some point, you would have bumped into in the world around you the term homosexuality. And you'd have thought, like that's what I am. Then you'd have looked around to find out what it means, and you'd have been told it's a terrible thing. And you would feel bad for being it, and you would try not to be it. And as you try not to be the thing that you are, you would acquire a whole load of mental health difficulties, because living inauthentically is bad for your mental health. And most neurodivergent people are forced to live inauthentically. And most neurodivergent children are taught to live inauthentically. So this seeds, mental health difficulties in the future. There are some strategies that are well established in research as working, because they will make a child do a particular thing, like when they're 10, but we don't look at the long-term effects and see that child did that thing when they were 10 and that was really useful in the classroom. What was the consequence to that child when they were 30? Because there are long-term consequences to these instant fix, miracle cure strategies. But you would have known you were different. You'd have learned what the difference was. You'd have been told that it was wrong and bad. You'd have tried not to do it, and that would have harmed your mental health. And at some point, you'd have realized that no matter how hard you try, you still are different. And that's a very high risk of death by suicide at that point, because you are this bad thing and you are condemned to be this bad thing forever. And if you live past that point, then hopefully you start to question the narratives that told you that it was wrong and bad. Hopefully you would meet people who were like you. When you first were on that journey and you got told you were a homosexual, you'd have looked around in the world and the only homosexual you'd have seen would have been a super camp person who is nothing like you. But then later on in that journey, hopefully you meet all different versions of people like you. And at the end of it, you're marching in pride, going, I am gay, I'm out, I'm proud. This is an okay way of being. And it's the same narrative. It's so the same narrative, because in the 1950s, the healthcare service would have been clogged up by gay people going for diagnosis because it was a medical diagnosis. And now it would be a nonsense to think that a GP would know better than you whether you're gay or not. It's totally ridiculous. And in a society that understands what neurodivergence is, where there's a general cultural understanding of what neurodivergence is, it will be as ridiculous to view this as a medical diagnosis as is to view being gay as a medical diagnosis. So if you want to solve that NHS clogging the systems problem, identity and representation, validating people's neurotypes, it has so much impact for the community as a whole. But if you are supporting the autistic person who's struggling, you want to do the same things to support them in their struggle that the supportive parents of the 50s would do. You don't go into the closet and hoik them out and go, I know you're gay. You go, here's what being gay means. And you show them all the ways that being gay means. And you go, and I'm okay with all of this, whichever one of these you want to be, I'm fine with that. Here's my gay friend. Should we watch this film that has these gay people in? Let's read these books that have gay characters in. You would make it a really easy closet to step out of. And I have people who say, I don't know whether I should get my child a diagnosis because I don't want them to be labeled and things like that. And the fear is real, and they're fearing the prejudice that child will experience. But your child will get a label no matter what. If you don't tell them that it is their neurotype, they will decide that it's because they're rubbish, because they're lazy, because they didn't pay attention, that there's plenty of other labels that they'll acquire. The research around identification shows that knowing your neurotype is protective of mental and physical health. So it's a really valuable thing. You don't have to slap it on a child straight away. It's really useful to develop that understanding of what this means before you tell somebody, because quite often children in school, the only reference point they have for autism is the other autistic kid in school, and they're like, well, I'm not like them. That's not me. So you need to build that understanding first, and then.
I think that is whether you give your child that label doesn't change whether they are or not autistic.
No.
What that label does is how much it's shared is up to you and the child, but it'll help them understand themselves, which is huge, so much bigger than people realise. And it also means when labels are thrown at them by other people, they know that that's not my real label.
Yes, yeah. And meeting your neurokin and using identity affirming language, all of these things are supportive. And if you had that child who is struggling with their mental health, or the adult, because this is very much not a child thing, because the experiences accumulate over time. And the reason that I'm one of the at-risk groups is my age as well. So if you look at the different ages of autistic people, it's middle-aged women like me that drop off. If you're looking for mental health support, it's really hard because we don't know. We're just learning now what to do and how to help. But my top tip would be, when you're approaching mental health specialists, ask them how they adapt their provision to meet neurotype. And if they tell you that it doesn't need adapting, back away. If they're willing to engage with the question, even if they don't have an answer to the question, then that shows that they understand that this is a thing. This isn't just.
I did some counselling. I had some counselling a couple of years ago, and the thing I was looking for is somebody who has, if they didn't have the word neurodivergent or anything like that on their profile, I was walking away. And it was because I just didn't want to go somewhere where we go, oh, this is how you need to be.
There is a risk of people just slapping neuroaffirming onto their branding as going, we are neuroaffirming, and then not really. I'd want to ask the question and see how they answer.
I was quite happy because I said this, and they were like, yeah, fine. And I was quite, I was quite happy. But it's one of the things I just wanted. And it came up in the first thing, I am. And yeah, so I think where we started is I do think overall mental health, there's positive and negative, is the same for everyone. But how we perceive the world, how we interact with the world, how the world interacts with us is what causes those mental health difficulties for autistic people, not the fact they are autistic. It's the world they are in, not them themselves. That is the problem. So don't go, well, everyone else can. Don't assume because everyone else can that they'll be fine or anything like that. They are perceiving the world in a different way. How that impacts them, you do not understand. And things you can do to support them, as you said, mindfulness may or may not work.
Yeah, I'd steer away. I think supporting them to understand what their emotions are and how to recognize them, giving them different ways of expressing their emotions. So that you've got to talk about it narrative isn't very helpful for people who are going to struggle with mouth words and things like that, giving other ways to represent emotions. Even down, I got divorced once and I represented my emotions during my divorce by laminating pictures of hamsters and putting them in hamster wheels and then marking up the wheels with the different causes of stress and then moving the hamsters according to how much stress I was under for the different things. So even laminated hamsters. But honestly, for me, communicating with my loved ones, that was much more easy. Allowing and validating things that the autistic community do naturally, like stimming to self-regulate, is really supportive. Identity and representation, really valuable. And looking at spoon theory and getting people to think about not only what costs them spoons, but what gives them spoons can be a way of helping people to cope with the mental stresses of life. But mostly, this is not for autistic people to change, because it's not the person who gets bullied fault that they get bullied. It's not the child's fault that they get assaulted. It's that multiple experiences of victimization and trauma that are part of an experience of prejudice and being a marginalized community. and recognizing that those are very big and very significant across the whole of the spectrum. And it's on the community as a whole to change.
The last bit I'm just going to add before we wrap up is certainty. It's one of the things that I've learned, not just with myself, with my daughters, with my colleagues. The more certain you can help someone feel, the more they know what's going to happen, the more they are prepared. My daughter, with seeing events going on at school, exams, what's going to happen? When's my study leave starting? The moment I can concrete say, this is happening then, we are leaving at this time, we are arriving at this time, the car journey is this long.
That feels more relaxing already, yeah.
It's those sorts of things. So what does that
Make a
cost me?
list.
I just have to think about it all ahead, prepare her for a couple of days beforehand, the day before. That's all it costs me, which is minimal, and she has a much happier time. So she just needs more certainty in her life. I can provide that by giving her that information, but also I can't always, and things happen, and she gets that. But where I can make those little changes, it gives her so much more certainty. And that's made, and I've realised this at work when we're going travelling, when we're going hotels. Where's the hotel? What's the food? How many people go on Google Street View to look at where they're going to before they go there? How many people look on
And how many of those people are autistic?
How many people go to, we're going to that restaurant, oh, cool, and then go home and go on the menu.
Yeah,
so
of
they
course.
can check what the options are before they even get close. There are lots of people who do little things like that just to increase that certainty. And it is such a free thing to solve most of the time. So really think about that certainty. And you might not need it. You might be able to go in and go, yeah, I'm quite que sera, whatever will be, will be. I am fully, but my children aren't. Which means when I'm with them, I need to be certain, because actually I feed off their uncertainty and I want to solve their uncertainty by making it certain. So therefore I need to be certain where we're going as a family. But it's all solvable.
I think I would put in the representation again. If you look on my YouTube, I have some free playlists of little short films. One's about the interplay between autism and disability. Another one is aimed at Senkos in schools, looking at things that are supportive of autistic people and things that are not so supportive. And things like my son's book, obviously I'm going to recommend my son's book because it's my little boy, but he wrote a book when he was 4 called My Mummy is Autistic. And I think there's a huge challenge in that book because oftentimes when you encounter autistic people in literature, it is autistic children. And there's a kind of background idea that we grow out of it. And it's always an adult explaining the child. And this is a book where a child is explaining the adult and are very much not grown out of it. And for the identification journey that I described, that journey from awareness through acceptance to embracing of identity, that's what I wrote about in The Subtle Spectrum. And there's lots of narratives out there now, and stand-up comics and people, actors coming out of the autistic closet. So finding those points of representation is a way of saying that you are valid. Like, here are your neurokin. You are acceptable as you are. You're not a broken thing. You're not a puzzle to be solved. Understanding who you are and feeling like you are able to authentically be yourself is great for mental health.
I would say there's lots of autistic people in literature. They just never identified as them.
Oh, yeah.
Sherlock Holmes, you can go through so many things.
I go back through 90s TV shows like Ally McBeal. She's clearly autistic, isn't she? Dawson or Joey Potter in Dawson's Creek.
Every cop drama. Oh, look, he's on his third wife.
All the detectives. Yeah.
But he's really good. See things no one else sees. You're like,
yeah.
Really? Do I have to spell it out?
Yeah, we've been around for a while.
And it's those sorts of things, but because it's not labelled as autistic or anything, or the autistic part isn't the reason they're a character. And sometimes when you have disability or anything, that the reason they're in there is for not just because they're a character in everyday life.
We've got good stuff. We've got the Sesame Street character, the autistic Sesame Street character, and Pablo. We've got children's representation coming through.
It's getting there. I'm going to wrap up. As always, we can keep talking forever. And we always do. And we are going to finish. We'll stop recording and again keep talking, which is great fun for me and you. As always, I've got some links from Joe to share, which I will put in the show notes as always. And I'll be sharing those in the show notes. So they'll be wherever you listen to the podcast or also on the Zencast website. Please follow us on all the social medias. On Twitter, we are at the Zencast, Facebook, the Zencast, Instagram, the Zencast, Blue Sky, the Zencast, and even TikTok. Zencast, I think.
Oh, follow me on social media too, but I'm not on TikTok.
You should be, with all your hula hooping.
I'm just too old to learn.
So, the Zencast is created by us here at B Squared, and Steps for Life is one of our assessment frameworks within Connecting Steps. It's designed for Key Stage 4 onwards and covers functional academic skills, employability skills, and life skills, and goes from the most complex pupils all the way up to level 2. And hear from one of our schools who use it. We introduce Steps for Life, having experienced the benefits of using Connecting Steps. It enables us to access the relevant skills our post-16 students are developing to prepare them for adult life. Steps for Life has a similar format to B Squared's other frameworks that we already use in school. This means staff are already competent and confident in using it, and also student information is transferred, which saves so much time. Visit the B Square website or click on the meeting link in the show notes to book a meeting with me to take you through our Steps for Life and our other assessment frameworks and how they can help you. So thank you for listening. We'll be back soon with another episode of the Zencast. It is goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
Bye, everyone.